An urgent health update about your soulmate you need to know now. Something interrupted an ordinary afternoon in a way nobody could have predicted. It wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a message. It was a quiet moment that suddenly felt different, as if an invisible thread connecting two people had gently pulled tighter. Somewhere, your soulmate paused in the middle of their day, rested a hand against a table, and smiled with a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. They couldn't explain why they suddenly felt the need to slow down. But that single moment became the beginning of a story neither of them expected. Before you decide you've already figured this out, stay a little longer, because one overlooked detail changes the meaning of everything. The room around them looked completely ordinary. Soft afternoon light stretched across the floor. A cup of coffee had gone untouched. Their phone buzzed twice, but they ignored it. Instead, they focused on something far more unusual. For days they had been pushing themselves without noticing how exhausted they had become. Not dramatically. Not dangerously. Just enough for their body to quietly ask for attention instead of another rushed schedule. Then someone close to them noticed what they had ignored for weeks. "You don't seem like yourself lately," the person said with genuine concern. Those simple words landed differently than expected. For the first time in a long while, your soulmate stopped pretending everything was fine. They agreed to take a break, breathe deeply, drink some water, eat a proper meal, and finally schedule a routine wellness check they had postponed again and again. It seemed like such a small decision, until the next conversation revealed why it mattered more than anyone realized. What happened after that wasn't filled with panic. It was filled with perspective. The healthcare professional smiled warmly after the appointment and explained that nothing alarming had appeared, but the visit came at exactly the right time. A few everyday habits needed attention before they quietly became bigger obstacles. Better sleep. Less stress. More balance. More moments that belong to life instead of endless obligations. Hearing those words felt unexpectedly emotional. Your soulmate realized they had spent so much time worrying about the future that they had forgotten to protect the present. As they stepped outside, the world somehow looked brighter than it had that morning. Cars passed. Children laughed nearby. A cool breeze moved through the trees. Everything looked the same, yet everything felt different. They understood that caring for themselves wasn't about fear, it was about protecting every dream they still wanted to live. But there was one thought they couldn't shake, and it had everything to do with you. Walking home, they replayed countless memories in their mind. Conversations that ended too soon. Words they wished they had spoken differently. Moments when they chose silence instead of honesty because life always seemed too busy. Suddenly those unfinished moments felt valuable again. They imagined what it would be like if two people truly encouraged each other to live healthier, happier, and more meaningful lives instead of constantly waiting for the perfect time. That vision refused to leave their thoughts. They even caught themselves smiling at strangers without realizing it. Sometimes clarity doesn't arrive through dramatic events. Sometimes it arrives through one ordinary afternoon that quietly reminds someone how precious tomorrow really is. And just when your soulmate believed the biggest realization had already happened, an unexpected message appeared on their screen, a message that would completely reshape the direction of this unfolding story. A soft notification appeared just as they were about to put the phone away forever that evening. It wasn't urgent by the world's standards, yet something about it felt impossible to ignore. They read it once, then again, and stood completely still. The words weren't dramatic. They were thoughtful, encouraging, and strangely timed. They spoke about slowing down, taking care of yourself, and remembering that the people who matter most deserve the healthiest version of you. Your soulmate couldn't explain why those simple sentences carried so much weight, but they felt as though life had quietly answered a question they hadn't spoken out loud. Instead of rushing into another busy day, they canceled one unnecessary commitment, took a peaceful walk through a nearby park, and allowed themselves to notice details they had overlooked for months: the sound of birds settling into the trees, the laughter of neighbors enjoying the evening, the cool breeze replacing the afternoon heat. Every step reminded them that true wellness isn't built through one perfect decision but through hundreds of small, intentional choices. They began writing a simple list of promises to themselves: sleep a little earlier, laugh a little more, eat without rushing, and stop carrying stress that never belonged to them in the first place. Then another thought quietly appeared. What if the person I'm meant to share my future with is making similar promises today? That question stayed with them long after the sun disappeared. If this story has touched something in your heart, share where you're watching from in the comments, and if you enjoy stories that leave you thinking long after they end, subscribing helps you discover the next chapter when it arrives. But don't leave just yet, because the next discovery revealed something even more meaningful. The following morning unfolded with an energy that felt completely different. Friends immediately noticed the change before your soulmate even spoke. Their face looked more relaxed. Their smile arrived naturally instead of feeling forced. They laughed more easily, listened more carefully, and no longer seemed trapped inside endless thoughts about tomorrow. One friend jokingly asked, "Did you secretly go on vacation overnight?" Your soulmate simply smiled because explaining the truth wasn't easy. The biggest change hadn't happened outside, it had happened inside. They realized that taking care of their health also changed the way they viewed relationships, dreams, and the future itself. They stopped measuring life by how much they could accomplish in a single day and started measuring it by how present they felt in each moment. That shift unexpectedly inspired others around them. A coworker scheduled a long overdue wellness appointment. A family member decided to join them on evening walks. Someone else finally admitted they had been neglecting their own well-being too. Without giving speeches or trying to influence anyone, your soulmate became the reason several people quietly chose healthier habits. They never expected one routine health update could create a ripple that reached so many lives. Yet there remained one unanswered question that continued returning every quiet moment. If positive change can spread this naturally, could it also be preparing two lives to meet at exactly the right season? Later that week, another ordinary afternoon carried an extraordinary surprise. During a peaceful walk beneath golden sunlight, your soulmate paused beside a calm lake where the water reflected the sky with remarkable clarity. They watched gentle ripples move across the surface and realized that health is much like that water. Even the smallest positive choice creates waves that travel farther than we imagine. They took out their phone, not to scroll endlessly, but to write a message they weren't ready to send yet. It wasn't a love confession or a dramatic announcement. It was a promise that whenever the right person entered the next chapter of their life, they wanted to arrive with renewed energy, genuine peace, and a heart capable of building something lasting. They understood that caring for themselves today was also a quiet gift to the future they hoped to share with someone special. Just as they slipped the phone back into their pocket, another unexpected notification appeared, one carrying a familiar name they hadn't seen in a very long time. The expression on their face changed instantly, and the decision they made in the next few seconds would quietly determine where this remarkable journey leads next. The name glowing on the screen wasn't someone your soulmate expected to hear from again. They didn't answer immediately. Instead, they took a slow breath and watched the phone ring until it stopped. A few seconds later, a thoughtful message appeared instead of another call. It wasn't asking for anything. It simply said, "I heard you've been taking better care of yourself. I'm really happy for you." Those few words carried no pressure, no hidden agenda, only genuine encouragement. Your soulmate smiled because they realized something important. The healthiest relationships are often built by people who celebrate growth instead of controlling it. That realization unlocked a completely new perspective. They began noticing how every healthy choice created space for clearer thinking, kinder conversations, and deeper confidence. They reorganized their daily routine, made time for peaceful mornings, prepared healthier meals, and even rediscovered hobbies they had quietly abandoned months before. Friends started asking what had changed because their energy felt lighter. They couldn't point to one dramatic event. It was simply the result of choosing themselves a little more every day. Yet beneath all of those positive changes, one quiet feeling continued growing stronger. They couldn't shake the sense that someone else was also moving toward the same destination, making similar choices without even realizing their paths were slowly beginning to align. Days passed, and life settled into a calm rhythm that felt surprisingly refreshing. Every sunrise seemed to carry a little more optimism than the one before. Your soulmate found themselves appreciating simple moments they once rushed past. A morning breeze through an open window, conversations without distractions, evenings spent reading instead of endlessly scrolling. During another routine follow-up conversation, they were reminded that lasting wellness isn't measured in a single appointment but through consistent habits that become part of everyday life. Those words stayed with them long after they left. Rather than chasing perfection, they focused on steady progress. That mindset quietly transformed everything around them. They laughed more freely, worried less about things outside their control, and discovered that emotional balance often begins with physical care. Then something unexpected happened. While organizing an old drawer at home, they found a folded piece of paper they had completely forgotten about. It contained a list of dreams they had written years earlier. One line stood out above all the others: "When I finally meet the right person, I want to be healthy enough to enjoy every adventure together." Reading those words felt like hearing advice from an earlier version of themselves. It wasn't coincidence, it felt like perfect timing. But one final discovery waited just around the corner, and it would make that forgotten promise feel more meaningful than ever. That weekend brought an invitation they almost declined. It was a simple community wellness event filled with local families, music, walking trails, and conversations about living a balanced life. Nothing about it seemed extraordinary at first. Yet something quietly encouraged them to go anyway. As they walked through the event, they noticed people of every age smiling, supporting one another, and celebrating small victories instead of impossible standards. The atmosphere reminded them that health isn't only about numbers or routines, it's also about connection, encouragement, and hope. Just before leaving, they stopped at a table where visitors were invited to write one anonymous message of encouragement for someone they had never met. Your soulmate picked up a card and wrote only one sentence: "Take care of yourself today because someone in your future will be grateful that you did." They placed the card into the collection box and walked away without looking back. What they didn't know was that another visitor had arrived only moments later. Someone whose own journey had been unfolding in remarkable ways. The card they were about to read would create a connection neither of them could possibly explain, and from that moment forward, the story would take an unforgettable turn. The stranger paused with the small card in their hands much longer than anyone else. Around them, conversations blended into the background, children laughed near the walking trail, and soft music drifted through the afternoon air. Yet those few handwritten words seemed to silence everything else. Take care of yourself today because someone in your future will be grateful that you did. They smiled without knowing who had written it, folded the card carefully, and slipped it into a jacket pocket instead of leaving it behind. At almost the same moment, your soulmate had already started walking toward the parking lot, completely unaware that something they wrote in less than 30 seconds had become the highlight of another person's day. Strange how life sometimes creates connections before people ever meet. Over the following week, your soulmate continued honoring the promises they had made after that important health update. Morning walks became a habit instead of an exception. Rest no longer felt like wasting time. Meals became moments to recharge rather than something squeezed between obligations. The greatest surprise wasn't simply feeling healthier, it was discovering a piece that had quietly been missing for far too long. People around them noticed it immediately. Conversations became warmer. Laughter came easier. Opportunities that once seemed out of reach suddenly appeared within reach because they finally had the energy to embrace them. If this story reminds you that small choices can create extraordinary futures, share your thoughts below and subscribe if you enjoy stories that unfold one meaningful step at a time. But don't go anywhere yet, because the next discovery reveals that this journey was never about one person alone. Several days later, your soulmate received an invitation to participate in a neighborhood wellness project that encouraged residents to inspire one another through simple acts of kindness. Without hesitation, they volunteered. They helped organize walking groups, greeted newcomers with genuine enthusiasm, and encouraged people who were nervous about making positive lifestyle changes. None of it felt forced. It simply reflected the person they had quietly become. During one gathering, an older participant smiled and said, "You look like someone who's been given a second chance to enjoy life." Those words stayed with your soulmate long after the event ended. They realized the urgent health update that once felt unexpected had become the beginning of something much bigger than a routine appointment. It had changed how they viewed time, relationships, and the future itself. Every healthier decision now felt like an investment in moments they hadn't experienced yet, future conversations, future adventures, and future memories waiting to be created with someone special. They couldn't explain why, but the feeling that another life was slowly moving toward theirs grew stronger with every passing day. It wasn't certainty. It was quiet hope, and hope has a remarkable way of preparing people before they understand why. As another beautiful evening settled over the city, your soulmate stopped at a familiar cafe before heading home. They ordered the same drink they used to rush through months earlier, but this time there was no hurry. Sitting near the window, they noticed a community bulletin board filled with handwritten notes from people sharing words of encouragement. One message immediately caught their attention because it echoed the same spirit as the card they had written days before. It read, "The healthiest version of you may be the greatest gift you ever give someone else." They smiled, wondering if life had a way of sending gentle reminders exactly when people needed them most. Just then, the cafe door opened, and someone stepped inside carrying a folded card that had traveled farther than either of them could imagine. Their eyes slowly scanned the room before settling in one direction. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them understood why the moment felt so familiar. But the quiet smile that followed suggested this remarkable story was about to move beyond hopeful coincidence, and into something neither heart would ever forget. For a brief second, the entire cafe seemed to fade into the background. Cups clinked softly, conversations continued, and the rain outside traced quiet patterns across the windows, yet neither of them noticed any of it. The stranger carrying the folded card hesitated before walking closer, almost as though an invisible instinct had encouraged one more step. Your soulmate looked up with the calm confidence that had slowly grown since that unexpected health update, and something remarkable happened. There was no dramatic declaration, no unbelievable coincidence, only an immediate sense of familiarity that felt comforting rather than overwhelming. A casual conversation began with simple introductions, followed by genuine laughter that arrived more naturally than either expected. They spoke about everyday life, favorite places to unwind, and how small choices had recently transformed the way they viewed the future. Eventually, the folded card found its way onto the table. Your soulmate recognized the handwriting instantly and couldn't help but smile. The stranger admitted that those few encouraging words had inspired them to begin taking better care of themselves too. Suddenly, what had seemed like a random message became proof that kindness often travels much farther than we ever imagine. One thoughtful sentence had quietly improved two lives before either person even knew the other existed. Stay with this story a little longer, because one final discovery was waiting just beyond that unforgettable conversation. Over the following weeks, their paths continued crossing in the most natural ways. Sometimes it happened during a morning walk, sometimes at the neighborhood wellness program, and sometimes over coffee after busy afternoons. Nothing felt rushed because neither person wanted to build a connection on excitement alone. Instead, they built it through consistency, encouragement, and shared respect for the healthier lives they were creating. Your soulmate realized that the urgent health update they had once viewed as an interruption had actually become the turning point that redirected everything. Had they ignored the quiet reminders to slow down, they might never have visited that wellness event, written that anonymous card, or discovered someone whose outlook reflected their own. The greatest surprise wasn't simply meeting someone meaningful. It was realizing that personal growth had quietly prepared both of them for this moment. Friends began noticing the difference as well. They saw brighter smiles, calmer conversations, and a confidence that came not from perfection but from balance. It became clear that the strongest relationships often begin long before two people meet. They begin when each person decides to become healthier, happier, and more present in their own life. As autumn slowly approached, the two of them returned to the same lakeside path where your soulmate had once stood alone after receiving that reassuring health update. The water shimmered beneath the evening sky, almost unchanged from that earlier day, yet everything else had evolved.